So as I was saying, first we started talking about the WCAG and in general, what is disability and what are the different affordances that we want to have. And then again, if you go back to those, like you're going to find that one of the things that is most important in your application is to control the focus. So if you see actually here, just looking at the actual website for WCAG, I can jump using tab on my keyboard towards like all the different links that you have in there. So if I go, for instance, to my website, I can have similar things on the different elements for the page, as you can see in here. And that allows me to, using only the keyboard, like jumping into the different parts of the page. If you're using something like, if for instance, you're a visually impaired people or person, and you need to use a website, then you can use like this type of focus to have a screen reader read all of the contents of the page. So because of that, is that we have to support a very good support of focus on our applications. So actually for the rubric, it is critical that your application can be navigated completely using the keyboard. So that's a very important one. So here is a classical example, and I want you all to go, remember that you can find the slides on the class website. Just go to John Guerra and then jump into the classes link, and then inside that you can see like the class page, and then that will take you to the accessibility slides. So having said that, like this form, it's like it was created like in Udacity for like an example on how you can create an application using just the keyboard. And basically you can, what I want you to do is go into this one and try to reserve a ticket that is going from Melbourne to Sydney, like say for next week or something like that. But as you can see, the interesting thing about this form is that you cannot use the mouse for controlling it. So you have to go and just do everything with your keyboard. For that, you can use just tab for jumping between elements. Once you jump into one element, I don't know if you can see this one in here has the focus. Then you can use, for instance, the arrows for switching like the different options. You can jump to the next one and then just start writing like the different elements that you want. Something I learned recently is that if, for instance, you're using something like Safari, you might need to use like Option tab in order for it to jump into other elements like the checklist and the search box. So please go and complete that. And once you have done that, I want you to realize like how difficult or hard it is, but at least you can complete it. And that's kind of like the same experience that you will be getting if you have one of these other disabilities that, as I mentioned, could be temporarily or situational. So always keep that in mind and just develop some empathy so you can create better applications for people. Now, in the context of our class, we have been using React, and React, basically, as I told you, it takes like your website when it starts with a blank page and then it renders inside, like especially the way we have been using it, when you use client-side React in a single page application, React will just be rendering there dynamically in the page, which confuses very much a screen reader, especially for visually impaired users. So one way that you can help the screen reader know what are the things in the page that need to be read is just by handling the focus. So for that, there is a focus function on an HTML element focus. So in any HTML element, you can just call the focus method, okay? So the only thing that you need to do then is to have a focus to get a reference to the focus element, and you can do that using an effect. And this is in the classical way using the component did mount. If you do need the reference, remember that you can use another hook called useRef that allows you to get references to different elements. So if you create an, let me see if we have an example in here. Yes, like for instance, in here, this one is creating like a reference that is starting on 0 and then just keeping contact on that. But let me see, we have another one. Yes. Next example. They don't have one in here. Oh yes, manipulating. This is the one that I was looking for. So if you create like an input or something and you want to give it the focus, then the first thing is to create a reference for that. So you just create a reference hook, and then you initialize that hook using, or that reference using the hook rather. And then when you use the GSX, you just say the reference to this is going to be the reference you created. And then having done that, then you can do, for instance, the focus, exactly the example that I was thinking about in here, okay? Now, the other thing that you have to take into account is that order of how things are being jumped into, like the fact that I can go like from this to the other one, it's because on how the page was created. So if you actually take a look at the source code for this element, basically, I guess it would be this one, then that one. So you can see like we do have a form, and that form has the trip selection, that then has a container, that then has a bunch of rows. And those rows are in the correct order that it is being displayed. Therefore, the browser, every time you hit tab, jumps into the next one. It is critical that the semantic order that you want things to be jumped into are organized in the same way in the HTML than in the visual way. So for that, the very first thing you can do is just put them in order. Because you can always go and change positions, and then I could say, let me see, I can pull this one off. So if I say position absolute, and then I say this is going to be on top 0 or something like that, or let's make it like top 100, or maybe too much. Top 20, you can see like 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. Like you can see I'm just moving this thing in here because I don't know, maybe I wanted that to show up there. The problem is that if you do that, when you jump into different elements in here, you can see after this one, it will then jump to the one on the top. So you can do those changes on CSS and in HTML because I don't know, maybe you wanted to create like a special effect, but then that is contradicting the order that the screen reader will want to see. So if you're putting this thing and you want that to be the first thing you do, then you just put that first in the HTML. I don't know if that makes sense. So the semantic order that you have in your HTML should be matching like what the semantic order you want the screen reader to go. And we are going to be specializing in that in here. Now, if for some reason you want that to be jumping in different orders, then you can use the tab index method. And as usual, just search for MDN tab index, and then you can see, you can see that it is an attribute for any HTML element, and therefore in React it will apply the same. And then it allows you to control first what are the elements that are focusable. So for instance, in here, we do have one input, another input. So if I don't include this tab index, let me cut that up. So if I jump in here, then I just hit tab and then it jumps to the next one. But if you put the tab index in here, then it jumps to the text as well, and now it becomes focusable, okay? Now, if for some reason, like, and that will be weird, like in this case, but you don't want this thing to be focusable, then you can add a tab index 0 or -1, which says like the user cannot get to that. And in this case, it doesn't make sense because it's an input that I want to be able to enter. But we are going to see later that whenever something is off screen or something, then you can add elements like that, okay? So avoid putting it on headers and content elements because like screen readers have specific options for doing that. As I mentioned, like if you have something that is off screen, then those shouldn't be focusable. So the other thing that I want to say is that even though I know Bootstrap, it's an old library, like many people don't like it anymore. One of the reasons why I still teach it is because they have great accessibility support, especially for screen readers. So there is an widget in here that I actually started just using on Bootstrap because I was AI coding and the agent recommended this element, and it's the off canvas. So the off canvas is very useful for, like, maybe with this one, yes, for having like a menu or something that will have like options, and it will only pop up when you click on that. So if you see here, we do have the link, and then just another button that does the same thing. And then here is your off canvas. This is what we call an off-screen element. So as you can see, this one is being created with a tab index of -1. And even if you put like a button or something like that, you still want to put that tab index -1 because otherwise the screen reader will read it where it is not visible. So you have to match the visual experience with the experience that the non-visual element or agent, like being the screen reader or like a machine learning, like crawler or something, or an agent will experience. So that is another interesting trade-off that we are getting nowadays, is that with all the new AI revolution, adding all of these accessibility features are actually very useful for you to get also better AI support. Okay. The other one that is very important, it's not having keyboard traps. So a keyboard trap will happen if, for instance, you have something like this, and for some reason you go and say, I am going to capture the input of the name just to make sure that users can, I don't know, add emojis every time they hit tab. The problem is that if you do that, like, and you capture the on input event, the moment that you hit tab, then the control will not let you jump to the next element. And that's what we call a keyboard trap. You have to be very careful of not adding those elements. So unless you're doing like something specific in there, probably is not going to have that problem. Then again, Bootstrap is very good on this, but if you go and see with the models, so here are some examples of models that you can create with Bootstrap. So here is a demo model. And then if I click in here, that brings the model. Then the whole idea is that once you do that, you should put the focus on the model so the screen reader reads it. But then on top of that, I should also be able to start and or to pop up and also to exit from the model. So there is some conventions that need to be supported. Like for instance, if I hit escape, the model should close. Then let me launch it again. And I can launch it either with enter or with space over the demo model button. Or I can just use the closure element. Remember that all models should lead towards closure. So if I do save changes, or I guess in this case close, then it should be closing, okay? So it is very important that whatever models you have like that will change. And then once you close, it is very important that it switches the focus back. If you're using something like Bootstrap, all of that is being taken care of for you. So that's one reason why I still like it very much.